Good morning to you, beautiful Chelsea Sutton. It's so exciting because we have a new book coming out, and it's very, very different than most of the books that I've worked with. It's called The Imaginist, um, Fairy Tales, Fables, and Folklore. So I was intrigued when I got your chapter as we put this book together. The picture was intriguing because it's just fascinating. But the name of the book of your chapter is The Vine Blinds in the Family Room. So let's talk about what this chapter is about and how did you come up with this kind of a story?
I got to be honest. First of all, thanks for chatting with me. And I'm excited for the interview in general. I'm excited for the book in general. This was a really challenging project for me. To be completely transparent, I have a marketing agency and write all the time, which Sharon, the main author, has pointed out to me. I didn't even realize I was, a writer. I didn't feel quite qualified to call myself that until she brought it to my attention. However, I deal in the very real, tangible world of, business and practical and logical. And although we use, emotional storytelling and we use a lot of the tactics that, of course, we are using in this book as well, writing in a fictional way that fits a subtitle like Fables Folklore, felt completely out of my comfort zone. And that being said, it was a really cool practice for me because what sort of inspired the story, probably partly because I was struggling with the idea of coming up with a fiction story in general, was taking real life experiences, real life relationships that I have in the very tangible world that we live in, and looking at them through a different lens and putting sort of a fairy tale to them. So there's literally everything in the book, just about everything in my chapter has some tie back to reality. Could be a lesson that I've learned or a relationship that I've had. But I told it in a way that was, whimsical and maybe a little bit more fun and fairy tale-esque.
Well, the exciting part about that is you will be doing that on a regular basis now that you have a new little one in your life. You will soon anyway, just weeks away.
Yes.
And
And that's
it'll
a
be
whole nother. Yeah,
fun.
yes. And I like my husband is much more, who is also in the book, much more of that, like, come up with silly phrases and sing a random song. And I just was kind of like, okay, that'll be your thing. And in writing the chapter, I actually, at first I was like, this is terrible. This is not meant for me. I'm going to do it now. And as I got towards the end of the process, I actually really found that I enjoyed it. So I'm excited to see how it'll show up now with, my first baby and having a newborn.
Oh, that is so exciting. So your Avastar, does she have a name?
She does. Her name is Harmony. And the idea there was so much of her character really developed. And I don't know that I went into the story with this intentionally. I just found that I began writing this way. And then once I realized the pattern, I stuck with it. There are a lot of things about Harmony that are things I hope for myself. They're sort of, intentions, characteristics, developments that I hope to see in myself or in, who I'm becoming. And the term harmony, someone introduced me, a great friend and business mentor introduced me to years ago. I'll never forget. I asked her about balancing work and career with home life, relationships, social activities. And she said, well, the problem's in your question. You shouldn't be looking for balance because that implies symmetry. You should be looking for harmony because that implies flow, right? And alignment and purpose. And so that's the concept of harmony has, that word has just resonated through my life for the last few years. And that's why I named her Harmony.
That is beautiful and so true, because balance is not really what we truly want. And I can't even imagine you living it, like everything just this way, because the way you dress, the way you fix your hair, your earrings you wear, everything about you is like, it's got to be in harmony with each other. It just won't work.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. So how your protagonist in the book, how did Harmony become your hero?
She, I think in part is a personal hero of mine because she has many of those characteristics in which I feel that I need to develop or work on. So there's like a very, personal piece to that. This chapter, I feel, is really barely setting the stage for probably who she is or will become over time. As I was writing, I remember calling Sharon and saying, like, I never thought I could write any piece of material that was fiction. And here I am thinking, I have 3/4 of an entire book written. How am I going to condense this down to one chapter? And so in this chapter, she starts to sort of show a little bit of the hero-esque piece of it. She goes through this experience where she has worked for a very long time to build up this community space that sort of exists like a treehouse, and someone that she loves deeply in the community tears a part of that down, and she has to emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually deal with that, including confrontation to, that person that she loves and all of those kinds of things. That's a very real experience that I have gone through. And I have struggled with figuring out how to love someone that has hurt me and yet deal with, behaving with them in a relationship in a way that goes forward. And so the process of writing about that experience, when I first started to write about it, I didn't even think I would include it in the chapter. It was sort of a cathartic process for me. And then I realized that is exactly what needs to be in the chapter because it's something I'm still working through and struggling with myself. So she sort of, comes to these realizations throughout the chapter that begins to make her that hero because she champions love and she champions perseverance for herself. And what she realizes is that that's not a selfish act. That's actually an act of gift and love to the greater community. And so that's sort of how she shows up as a hero.
That is absolutely beautiful. I find that whether it's a children's book, which I've done a number of those for different authors, a nonfiction book, or a book like this, we typically write from our life experience, and we write from the places where those difficult things that we've experienced is how we've grown, and they become our superpowers, our hero within. And it doesn't matter whether it's a nonfiction book, we're still sharing stories that help people to understand how we overcame. And now we're taking in this make-believe part's a whole new facet of how to do this and it really kind of expands a whole lot on our own life, I think. Yeah.
It does. And I think for me, it was actually a really transformative process because when I wrote about it in a fairy tale sort of way, it made it obvious, right? It made the solution obvious. It made the actions necessary obvious because you break it down in a somewhat basic, and lighthearted kind of story. It's about a tree house and, tree vines, and we can all deal with that. And it kind of takes the scary out of it, if you will.
Right.
And I realized that was a really cool personal practice for me, to realize that like, this is all just life and we're all figuring it out and we're all navigating it. And, if we just take one step at a time and think about it as vines in a treehouse, I'll get to the next day and it'll be okay.
Oh, that's beautiful. What do you hope somebody that picks up this book and comes to your chapter receives from this?
That is really hard question for me to answer because it was told in such a fairy tale way. When I first contributed to the Silver Sisters book, that was a very practical business lesson. There was a very clear, here is the lesson I want to outline. Here is the takeaway that I want others to receive. In this one, I actually am really open to what people receive from it because I think there are multiple stories, there are multiple lessons within this chapter. And I think for anyone who reads it, that might resonate with them based on what they're going through completely differently. I hope ultimately that somebody has fun with, the way that I've told the story and the sort of make-believe elements to it, but finds something in some piece of the story that they can translate into their own life. So whether that is a direct parallel, been hurt by someone and glean some insight there, or whether it's a very distant parallel in some other manner, I'm happy if someone, receives either a lighthearted, fun story from it, or truly sees maybe a path forward that they didn't otherwise know there was a path for.
Something truly to ponder. Yeah. So taking our conversation just a little bit different direction is, when you sit down to write, is there something, and you do a lot of writing in life in general, how do you set the stage for writing? Because for me, it takes, it's like you have to kind of clear things out of your surroundings and be in that mindset. So how do you prepare yourself for any kind of writing? But, I know this was a little bit different, but still, it's still writing.
Sure. I will answer that first by answering how I approach other writing, and then I'll tell you how I had to change it for this one. So much of the writing that we do in the marketing space exists where the purpose and the goal, the story, the target audience is already very clear. And so at a very practical sense, my writing process for any of those types of materials could be press release, it could be a website, it could be social media content, which we're doing tons of that every single day. I typically sit down, and that could be with a physical, I still do physically write quite a bit. I also do a lot, obviously, digitally. So whichever platform or medium I'm using, I try and clear my mind and focus on two very specific things. Who am I writing this for? What channel am I writing this for? What target audience am I writing this for? And what is the one key message or takeaway that I want to give them? That's worked for me for 12 plus years in the marketing space. And with this story, I had to sort of scrap most of that. And Sharon did a great job in coaching and providing prompts and ideas, and really released the rules for me. We started writing this months ago. And one of the things that she encouraged me to do was write about whatever I was experiencing or going through, and then add fiction, right? Make it a story, put it in a fairy tale, and just write about it. That felt so different for me, because it's like, well, for what, right? Like, what's the message that I'm trying to share? And she said, you'll figure that out as you go, right? And so that was a really challenging process, but a cool process. I also, through that, realized that I started this as a late teenager, maybe 15, 16 years old. I started in the morning to make a part of my kind of daily practice, my spiritual practice, journaling my prayers. So instead of vocalizing them or sort of saying them in my head, I write them. And like I said, I've done this for years. And as I've gotten older, maybe gotten a little bit more lazy about it, maybe it's a few times a week instead of daily, what I realized is this sort of writing was similar to that. And it was don't think about the reason that you're writing. Don't think about the purpose that you're writing. Just use writing as a tool to process, as a tool to express, as a tool to think about maybe things that you've experienced or are going through or others are experiencing. And so I did that for a few months. I just, for literally a few minutes a day, Sharon asked for 17 minutes. Some days I gave it 4. Some days I would just catch myself, getting in a mood and spend half an hour or 45 minutes writing. And I definitely found that over time, as I just jotted things down, what happened was certain topics that I would write about would sort of marinate. Some of them you just write about and you let go and you don't think about again, and you've put it on paper, and so now it's you're done with it. Other topics they would just come back to me mentally, they'd show up throughout my day, or I'd ponder maybe where I was going with that or why I was thinking about that. And that's what I found made its way into some portion of this storyline, those things that kept showing back up for me. And then I was like, okay, there's something there. And I do believe that there is I know it's kind of a cliche term, but there's a level of collective consciousness that we all have, right?
Absolutely.
We're all going through and experiencing similar things in our own lives, in our own stories. And so I just trusted that whether that was spiritual guidance or personal intuition, the things that were showing back up for me probably were showing up for others, not just
Absolutely. Yes, and there's a ripple effect by taking the time to do what you've just done with this chapter in this book. It does create a ripple effect. It will reach the hearts of those who need to read a message like that, because it takes it away, I think, from the busy work part of it, and into allowing your mind just to kind of relax into something that's lighthearted and also fun, but walk away with, wow, that was really amazing. So what a delight to be able to have this interview. I know you're just, what, 2 weeks away now?
Yes, 17 days. Not that I'm counting. I'm not counting.
Not counting. She may come early.
Right.
Yeah. Well, many blessings to you, and thank you for taking this time just to really have this conversation. And we will have a really fun book launch. And I'm really thankful for you that you participated. So enjoy this time.
Thank you. I was glad to be a part of it. Anytime that I can learn and grow from, Sharon's guidance is always a blessing. And having you on the publishing side takes the stress away of the nitty gritties that I'm also often so worried about in running my own business in the very practical world. So I also think it's a really, at first, as I realized the book launch was going to coincide with literally the week I'm giving birth. Yeah. That brings a level of like, oh gosh, was this the right choice? And I actually think it's perfect.
It sets the tone for that baby to be in your arms.
So
Awesome. Very good. Thank you. So let's just stop this, stop that, and